Welcome back to the Quest from Quarantine, my personal journey to find growth while in lockdown, the strength to keep it and to share it with those on a similar path. This is episode number 2, The Age of Quarantine. That's a triple entendre. So first and foremost, the most blatantly obvious, I'm sitting here locked down in my house the past couple of weeks. The second notion, which we're definitely going to get into with today's guest, is the notion that we may have had social distancing long before coronavirus came around, and that's something I want to explore. And third, and absolutely most important, is today's guest, Mr. John Joseph. So, brother, thank you so much for making the time to do this.
You know, when you blow the trumpet, I show up. That's
that's love. That's love. And
well, you're always there for me. So
well, that's what brothers do. That's what brothers do.
Before you know what I'm talking about?
That's what's up, man. You gotta take care of yourself if you want to take care of others. You know,
yeah.
Drill those muscles. Before we get into any of the questions, man, how's everything going? How are you doing? I know you just got off the bike. I just got done with my fire pit, but how are you holding up?
Yeah, I'm training. You know, I'm doing a lot of writing. I'm trying to get my writing projects done. I had a bunch of stuff going on, you know, prior to this with the new cookbook I got coming. You know, the agent got the cookbook and working on the film stuff. And, you know, it's allotting me, I can't even say like, you know, now I have all this free time because this is part of my regular journey daily anyway. It's what I do. I get up 5, 6 in the morning, whatever. I write for 3-4 hours. I train. I do what I got to do. And I was taking time off from touring anyway. I mean, you know, the one thing is my walking tours got canceled because nobody could come and get into the city. But, you know, my girl went up with her mom in the woods with the dog up in Massachusetts in the country.
Okay.
So, you know, there's that. I don't have to walk a crazy 100-pound fucking pit bull that wants to tear everything apart on the street. But
I think the pit bull's probably almost as wild and uncontrollable as 2 little kids running around tearing shit up left and right.
Exactly. You know what I'm saying.
I get bit too. I know what that's like.
Right.
Good, man. I'm glad to hear it.
You got clean up duty.
I trust me. I'm getting it under my fingers, everything. I know all about that. And then I have to change the kids. So I sent over a couple of questions. I assume we're gonna, go off on a couple of tangents, and I want to preface everything we talk about, and you hinted at this before we hit record, is that I don't want to use today as a platform and potentially undermine some of the intensity of what other people are going through. Right now, I'm fortunate enough, you're fortunate enough. I don't personally know anybody that's sick. So the things and the concepts we're going to talk about are really relating to people that are in our situation, where it's really just a deterrence from the ability to maintain a standard schedule, and not so much trying to undermine the intensity and severity of what other people are going through. And you started touching on it, the not extra time, but I guess the forced time at home. And I got to thinking, I saw some memes all over Instagram about, people making excuses to not get XYZ done, assuming that you're not sick, you've got all the time in the world. So what's going to be your excuse? And it got me thinking about the concept of growth. When I think about growth, you're one of the first people I always think about, because you're doing everything: the band, the books, podcasts, vlogs with some chucklehead like me. But as it pertains to growth, I think that there's 2 different paths. There's the reactionary growth, where you're responding and adapting to something, or like Carl from Earth Crisis would say, adapt to the harshness or become one with the dust. So me at home now, I'm learning that I didn't really have the tools it took to be the best dad I could be, because I'd have my kids for an hour or two, I'm off at work, but stuck in the house hour after hour after hour, and you're forced to either learn the patience that it takes and the tools and the communication, or things go all over. And then there's the proactive, where you're set out on a path, you know exactly what you want to get to, and you're proactively chipping it down. And I have found that as far as the latter is concerned, I used to read a book a week, listen to podcasts left and right, that I'm having a harder time, and I don't know why that is. But I have found the ability, and I'm giving myself permission to do things like this, starting a new vlog, starting a new podcast. So before we get into the details, because you have your hands in so many different pots, I just want to start simply, what does growth mean to you? Free association.
I mean, growth to me means that we're trying to improve ourselves daily. You know, and that can be in a lot of areas too, in our relationships, with our work ethic, our meditation, our internal practices, our physical practices. I mean, one of the things that I'm seeing a lot, because I follow a lot of people that are in the race circuit and running and stuff like that, and because that was extricated out of their life right now, a lot of them are not able to deal with that right now. I was talking to Rich Roll about that the other day, and I said, when you put all your eggs in one basket and that's all you have, and you have nothing else, and you obsess over that one thing, obsession's a good thing, because in order to improve, we do have to become obsessed with what it is we're doing, so that we want to improve and get better at it. But I'm just seeing like that's all they had, and it's like now it's taken from them and they're losing their shit. And you know, to me, I'm like, I try to have, you know, many eggs in different baskets and work on projects. Not that you spread yourself too thin,
Sure,
because then you don't get shit done. I know people that do that too. My point is that growth is you're working on the things that you should be working on, and you get after it every day. And, you know, people a lot of times don't get the desired result out of the box, and then they quit. Sure. You know, I see a lot of that. I see a lot of that too. And, you know, we just have to stay the course and try to improve ourselves. And that's where discipline comes in, because a lot of people said, oh, you know, this, that, the other thing. They made excuses. I don't have time. Now you got all the time in the world. So if you ain't getting your shit done, it's not a lack of time. It's a lack of discipline.
Exactly.
I just watched Jocko just put up a whole thing about every day, and he had a grease board there, you know, and he's writing down. And one of the things he said is the night before, and this is what I do, the night before, you have to write down what you're going to do the next day. Yep. And you start boom, 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 boom. If you wake up you sleep in and you get in this whole mood of like, well, nothing's happening. The world's on pause right now. So I'm just going to sit here and fester and watch movies and then all this other shit. I'm getting after it, man. I'm getting up every day. I do my meditations. I got my rebounder. I got, you know, all my tools of the trade.
Yeah,
I'm doing my trigger point. I'm stretching, all the stuff you taught me. And I'm doing cooking videos and putting that out there. You know, people basically, you know, having a family, we're so busy with everything that the family mealtime has become a thing of the past. And I think that that's important to bring back, where people sit down, you take all the fucking cell phones away from everybody, and you have those things that we used to call conversations.
Exactly.
That's part of growth, man. We have to connect with each other. And I'm seeing a lot of that going on now. people connecting, you know?
It's funny you brought that up. So, and I have a different point I want to circle back and ask you about. But when I look at growth, I look at the process and first identifying that adage, the chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And a lot of people like to work on and focus on the things they're already good at because their ego gets a little massage session out of it. I like to sit back and identify what can I not do very well. And, you know, I'd ask you about things that you identify and, you know, and I'd brought up the notion of all the books that I'm reading. So I'm trying to build my intellect. And I got to a point where I don't know if it's the stress that I'm not really giving myself permission to deal with, is I just don't have the bandwidth to sit and just keep reading books and listening to podcasts. But I'm also not the type of person to just sit back and twiddle my thumbs. So, you know, I started thinking, well, what are some other areas for growth I could have? And in spite of my being in front of people all the time as a personal trainer, doing podcasts, teaching workshops, I realized I have lost the ability to sit down and talk to somebody. When I'm doing a personal training session, it's usually one directional. It's little blips of conversation. Even podcasts, we're not being our true selves sometimes. And I said, you know what I need to do is I need to put myself under the microscope and start getting in front of people and just talking again, because you know, we're in this age now where most of the communication is, you know, again, little snippets via text.
Yeah.
And I've lost that, you know, and there was part of it that kind of, you know, I wouldn't say terrified me, made me a little nervous, but I said, that's a good thing. You know, if you're nervous, you know, you're alive. But, you know, the one thing I wanted to ask you, and this is going to segue into the next question, is let's say, you know, that was my ultimate goal, the intellectual process. And I'm at this point where, you know, I don't have the bandwidth. I just can't focus for whatever reason. And I assume that The Art of War talks about this, but I haven't read that. And I think that most people that take whatever they do seriously are artists. They have, you know, the art of parenting, the art of doing whatever. You're constantly trying to refine your craft. So I know that you've read that book because you've talked about it
like
before,
5 times.
So in a situation like that, where if, let's say I didn't have the aha moment, the epiphany, you know what, I'm going to redirect my energy into something else. I'm going to start this vlog. I'm going to start a new podcast, because I opened with, you know, I don't want this growth to just be for me. Anybody who's watching this that says, you know what, me too, I want to try to find a way to keep building myself up. I feel fortunate in that I have these different outlets, but let's say I did only have that one. You know, we identified some people, it's the running or the triathlons, but what if it was just building up my intellectual foundation? What would you, or what would the Art of War say about, I'm assuming, the discipline to get back on track, so that you don't fall victim to, you know what, fuck it, there's no point anymore?
The main thing that Stephen Pressfield talks about, what our greatest enemy is the resistance. That's what he talks about in that book. And I'm guilty of the same thing, you know. And the thing about it is, when we cave into resistance, and it could be the littlest thing, like I said, and also that brings up the 4 agreements, being impeccable with your word. That when you say you're going to do something, you do it. And the thing is, it could be the littlest thing. And it could be, okay, I said I'm going to make my bed and get my closet together over here. I'm going to straighten out. I'm going to wash all my bike clothes, right? Yep. If I don't do that, I gave in that little much to resistance. I gave in that little tiny bit. And that's all resistance needs, is a crack in the fucking door.
It's like poison ivy. You scratch it a little bit and it spreads and it spreads.
And I'm going to tell you something else. For the last week, I've been washing my bike kits because I said I was going to do it. And every time I didn't do it, and then every time I would open up my closet and I saw the pile of stuff, it would I gave in to the resistance, and it would annoy me.
Yeah.
My mind would become restless. Just like if I said, I'm gonna get these scenes done today. All right. By the way, I just spent the last week washing all my bike clothes. I just finished today, and I feel
I
great.
take it. You're not the type of man to set out on a task and not follow through.
You feel magnificent.
Maybe there's a day or an hour of hesitation, but it gets done.
But you know, it's the same with writing, right? Like if I say, the hardest thing to me is when you're writing either a film or working on a book, and it's two things, and it's rewrites on a script after I've already finished. I think it's the best fucking thing ever. Then I have somebody like Patty Jenkins who did Monster or Montiel, or some of these people I really respect give me some coverage. And if you don't get your ego out of the way with that, why even ask professionals on that level to even read your shit, right? So then, and it's the same thing when I just finished my 4th book, and I'm waiting on edit notes from the.
And that's the cookbook?
Yeah. But
awesome.
I've also, you know, the memoir, the PMA book, and gotten back to notes, and then it's like, holy shit. And then I'm sitting there and I'm like, it's a fear of failure, but it's also that resistance is there to do the work. That's another one of Stephen Pressfield's books called Do the Work.
Okay.
And what he says in that book too is the number one impediment to improving in your work is resistance. Resistance to change, resistance to get it done. That's the real enemy. And he says resistance is always full of shit. It's always trying to con you to work its way and get through that little crack in the door.
Yep. And I actually did a vlog post a year or so ago about this, and I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, I don't understand the psychological implications, but just as an old hardcore kid, a dumb schmuck off the streets, I came to realize after deciding to listen to the resistance for long enough and then start to act on it and actually go against the grain, that more often than not, 99.9% of the time, whenever you feel that resistance, especially to the point where you can put your finger on it, it's almost always something good for you. And I don't know what the foundation for that is. I don't know if there's something deep inside of us that is pushing for some sort of comfort or safety. But I've always noticed that as soon as I identify that there is any resistance, probably a good idea just to jump on it and tackle it, no matter what it is. Brought up, the notion of doing something the night before. And I've talked about that also, in that also limits the excuse, because you know what your schedule is like the night before. You do it a week before, like, oh, sorry, something came up. The night before, you know what your day looks like. And I think even more important than that, which tapers the ability for procrastination or lack of execution even more, is being reasonable. Now, let's say you had 100 pairs of outfits for your swimming and your cycling. If you had to wash them by hand, for you to say, I'm going to do this all tomorrow, maybe. But if you can look at whatever's in front of you and figure out what's reasonable, not lazy, but what's reasonable within the scope of everything I have to do today. And it's not get the whole thing done. It's get done whatever benchmark you established. You can still feel good about yourself at the end of the day. And I think that's the other thing that people tend to overlook is, the ego. And if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do all of it. Like, that's not realistic.
Not the way it works.
You need to be driven, but you also need to be realistic. And that sense of accomplishment. And I say often that a series of small wins equals a big victory. That if every day you got this much done because that's what you had the potential to do, every day you go to bed feeling good about yourself. You feel optimistic about your abilities, and you got shit done at the same time.
Absolutely. You know, I talk about that in the last book I just put out, The PMA Effect. We have to compartmentalize stuff and break the load down into manageable tasks. Like if I said I'm gonna wash all my bike clothes today, that's it. I wouldn't probably do it, first of all, and then my whole apartment would have been soaked with water, because you have to wash all that stuff by hand. So, you know, the whole thing is to make, you know, to break challenges down. Same thing with an Ironman. It's like, when I'm in the swim, I'm in the swim. I'm swimming that 2.4 miles. I break it down mentally too. And I stay in the moment. I don't start thinking, okay, man, oh, you know, halfway through the swim, I'm just enjoying being in that moment. And I'm not thinking, holy shit, I got to get out and bike 112. And then, like, I'm going to run a marathon. And then when you're on the bike and you're, like, hurting it 78, 80 miles in on the bike, and you're like, how the fuck am I going to run a marathon off of this bike? It's like, you don't think like that. You stay in the moment, and you enjoy it. And the other thing, what you mentioned is so true, because that's what Stephen Pressfield said. Things of value in our life have the highest level of resistance, because, you know, that false ego that we all have is what's really holding us back, because that's that voice in your head that's putting the demons of doubt and everything else. And when it comes to, you know, things of the highest value, you're going to resist the most towards those things.
Now, do you think that is, and you touched on this a little bit, the notion that, and I always think about that 80s song, and I don't remember what the name of it is, but you never win or lose if you never run the race. And that whether it's conscious or subconscious, if you know it's that valuable to you, for you to put yourself out there and say, you know what, I'm going to go after this, that you know that you've made yourself that vulnerable that in the best case scenario, it's going to get done. But the absolute worst is you fucked up. It didn't get done. But I feel like a lot of people, again, whether conscious or subconscious, fall victim to the, well, I can't lose if I don't run the race. So I'm gonna yield to this resistance, because it's better to just stand on the sidelines and then rather than figuratively run and fall flat on my face. So that's unfortunately what I think a lot of people fall victim to. And that leads me into the next question. You talked about mindset.
Well, I just want to let me touch on one word that you said.
Please,
very important.
Please.
And that word is vulnerability. That's what people are scared of. And as I'm adapting my book, The Evolution of a Cro-Magnon, you know, I'm sorry to keep referencing the writing, but this is something that I'm focused.
Please, brother, reference away.
So the film, I'm like, all right, how do I adapt this book? What's the defect in this character that, you know, caused me after so much growth to then backslide and get into 2-year crack and pill and booze addiction and have people looking to kill me and getting shot at with AR-15s because this dude I was smoking freebase with robbed Cuban drug. I mean, just insanity. And one of the themes in the flick was that I had such a resistance to put myself out there and my emotions and feelings and try to love somebody because of what happened to me as a kid. Being in a bad foster home where I tried to love those people and they abused me, or my mom abandoning me. Yep. So I personally didn't make myself vulnerable out of fear that it's going to happen again. I would get in relationships, and then when the love thing started coming around, and I would cut it off. And there's people like, why did you break up with me? And I'm like, it's just not working out. But it was me, it was me. And it took a lot of years and so much heartache and tears and blood and to get to the point where like I'm able to actually function in a relationship the way I am now with Erica, who I've been with for like 7 years.
Yep.
Yep.
And I think that's it. I asked you the question, what is growth? And I feel like we're volleying back and forth. And again, I think the most succinct way to put it is vulnerability, because I find myself saying this all the time, that if you're ever the strongest, smartest, or toughest man in the room, you need to find a new room to hang out in. So
that's a good one.
Like, what are you really saying in that is that you need to put yourself in a position where there are constantly going to be people surrounding you that are checking you, that are challenging you, letting you know what your shortcomings are, letting you know where there's room for improvement, where there is room for growth, which is the single word that we open with. And you cannot put yourself, just thinking about jujitsu. If I was a blue belt and I only rolled with white belts because I wanted to feel good about myself because I'm tapping them left and right.
I know people that do that.
Yeah, so do I. So do I. I know a few of them. But for me to just put that concept in a vacuum, if I want to get better at jujitsu, I need to go roll with purple belt. I need to go roll with brown belt. And you are vulnerable as fuck in that situation, because all these things I thought I understood, all of a sudden, like, why is my arm because you're not as good as you thought you were. You can get better. You need to keep putting yourself, inserting yourself in that position to get fucked up left and right. And you have to be vulnerable, not just physically, we're talking about jiu-jitsu, but mentally and emotionally.
Sometimes we create these safety nets around us, and only people that call us out on our bullshit, if we're not trying to that word growth, like, this famous philosopher in India, Chanakya Pandit, said, he who glorifies me is actually my enemy. Because the real deal is people call you out on your bullshit. And I had to have that happen because, I was doing a lot of stupid shit and it was those people that said, hey man, this ain't right.
But that goes back to what we were talking about resistance earlier is the resistance in any friend around you thinking like, I see this going on, but I don't think I should say something. The people that yield to that resistance, like, you know what, I'm just gonna let John be, versus the one like, fuck that. Like, I feel the resistance. I don't want to upset my friend. I don't want him to punch me in the face, but if it means that much to me to risk those things because I care about him, then I need to go say that. So that applies even to that situation when you're looking at resistance and growth. So you had brought up the notion of mindset, and that is the second word in one of the other topics I wanted to bring up. And I had a conversation with a good buddy of mine, Caesar, last week, and we're talking about meditation and people's resistance, the barrier from entry. And I think that this applies to all things. We can look at fitness. Somebody who ate the right foods, worked out every day, got their body looking exactly the way they wanted, and then something happens in life. You fall off the wagon. Sometimes it's something traumatic, who knows what. But at any rate, you backtrack and you look in the mirror, sometimes literally, sometimes figuratively, and you're like, you know what? Like, I don't even fit into these pants anymore. What's the point? Because I put in all that work and I'm back here now. So why would I put all that effort into going back in that direction again when I know I can wind up right back here? So the question is what is the that it takes to get back on track? And I know that you definitely have some stories about that.
I wasn't texting somebody. I was pulling up my quote from the other day of a word that I put on Instagram, and the quote was, people that say things are impossible, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let me just read this to you. The impossible becomes possible by developing the quality of resilience.
Yep.
Its definition alone speaks volumes. The ability to recover from setbacks or difficult situations, to adapt to change and keep going in the face of extreme adversity and failure. Toughness. So really that's what it comes down to is, you know, we all have setbacks in everything that, you you come from boxing, that's your world. Like,
yep.
You know, the saying, it's not how many times a fighter gets knocked down, it's how many times he gets back
Yep.
up.
And I think it's
With
important.
Some of the best fighters saying, I didn't grow as a fighter till I had that first loss. Because I was riding high on the horse, and then when I got knocked on my ass, that's when I had to muster up who the fuck I really am.
Exactly.
You know?
There's a saying I love, you win or you learn. And you had brought up resilience, and I think it's human nature. I mean, nobody's perfect. No, or at least I haven't met anybody yet that is. And it's human nature to get, led astray for whatever. And the resilience is in the inner monologue, not the resilience to be able to fight off any temptation and always walk the perfect line. It's that inner monologue and that resistance that we talked about before, and that resistance being, why would I even bother when I got knocked down on my ass? I spent all this time working to get to this place. And we use the reference of the boxer, like I spent all that time sparring, hitting pads, and I got knocked down on my ass. The resilience in that inner monologue telling you, you know what, it ain't worth it. No, it is worth it. Whatever knocked me on my ass, it wasn't a loss. It was a place to learn, because whatever knocked you on your ass was just exploiting that weakness inside you. And if you can sit back, and I know David Goggins does, I forget what he calls it in Can't Hurt Me, but not an after action report, but basically, writing down, like, things were going along well, something happened. What was it? It was my girl broke up with me, whatever it was, and finding ways to take whatever it was that exploited that weakness, whatever your kryptonite is, and forming a plan around that, because that's going to happen again down the road. So it's not that you're impervious to any of those figurative kryptonites, is you have a plan in play for when they do pop up again. Well, now you're stronger, so I think that is unbelievably valuable, to be able to take those losses, those lessons learned, and learn how to adapt and grow from them.
Well, I think that's absolutely 100% true. And the other thing why people don't take action or fail and then don't get back on the horse is because they have a fear of failure. And one of the things that Robert McKee talks about, and I'm going to keep referencing writing, because writing is philosophy, man. It's life, right? So people have a fear of failure, so they become paralyzed. They don't take action. Maybe they failed, and then it's like, okay. Like I wrote about it in my book after the first time I had a DNF, did not finish in Florida. I got hypothermia, and then like 2-3 weeks later, I had the ability to sign up for another race. And I had my boy who's an active duty Navy SEAL. He was you know who I'm talking about.
Oh, I know.
And he was deployed, and he goes, get your ass back on the fucking horse, man. Immediately.
Yep.
You failed because of lack of preparation. This is a test. Get back on the horse. And then I got this like email literally like 2 days later that the Cozumel Ironman didn't sell out. It was 2 weeks away. Went right back to training, went down there, worked with you, went right back down there, and I fucking and I PR'd. I set a personal record for the, so that's what the whole thing is. But see, in life, what makes great stories is what Robert McKee, who wrote the book Story, which if you want a philosophy lesson on life and storytelling and everything and amazing characters development, read this book Story. He talks about that the power of story is in the gap between expectation and result, right? So we take a particular action, right? We put all of our plans that we've been planning and training or whatever, we put it into action, right? And we are expecting a certain reaction from the universe, right? But the universe doesn't react in that way. The universe reacts in another way. And that cracks open a gap between expectation and result. So now you have to gather your shit back together and take a second action. And that action is what puts us at risk, right? And that's what people fear. Oh my God, I have to risk this now. So story is, when you write a story, because that's what I'm doing, you put these characters through gap after gap, between expectation and result. And the risk level keeps going up and up and up to the end of the line for the object of desire that's waiting since the inciting incident when shit goes wrong in the beginning. Something happened and your world fucking changed.
Yep.
Like my father trying to murder my mom and them putting us in foster care and orphanages. And you working to the end of that line through gap after gap after gap, willing to risk time and time and time again. Everybody wants to play it safe. They want to have their cake and eat it too. That ain't the way shit works.
Yep. And I want to touch on 2 points. So as far as the gap between expectation and outcome, and I just referenced David Goggins, but I'll reference him again. And I think the other avenue that people set down that sets them up for failure is, he referenced it. I don't remember, what's the race in Death Valley?
It's called
the brutally.
Fuck.
Whatever it is, but it's unbelievably hot. So he was talking about the mental prep for that, the mental prep for the Himalayas, talking about getting, prepping his mind to go into buds.
Bad water.
Bad water. And he said, as I was sitting there and conjuring up my expectations, like I was sitting in an air-conditioned car. I was sitting on my couch. So it's easy to conjure up these expectations when your foundation is in comfort, and, the universe rocking the boat isn't anything other than reality. It is you chose to narrate this plot where you're going to feel the exact same way as you did in the air-conditioned car on the couch. Like, no, that's not where it works. And we talked before about, prepping the night before, being realistic. Well, when you're setting your expectations, you need to be realistic also about the bumps in the road, and figuratively speaking, the temperature, so all the things that are definitely going to get in your way, setting those up. And, this is kind of out of left field, but I definitely wanted to touch on this with you. You said, I don't know if you apologize for it, but you said, sorry about bringing up writing. And I think we've both identified that the biggest thing that people are scared of is the vulnerability and people seeing what's really going on inside of them. And from my perspective, I think that writing is probably one of the most vulnerable places you can be in, because you are putting your intellect, your creativity, your heart, your soul onto something that's tangible, that can be owned by somebody else and reviewed and nitpicked with a pencil and paper. So as far as trying to take who you are and put it out there to be judged by everybody else, actors and actresses, I mean, I think that it's a wonderful craft, but you're playing something else. And even if you're writing fiction, you're still exposing your intellect and your creativity, and you're making yourself vulnerable for that critique and that criticism. And I think that's what most of us are scared of. I used to, Clay really well. So he is one of the heaviest handed dudes I've ever met.
I love that fucking
guy. Love him to death. I was never scared once to spar with Clay. I loved it, so, but there was this fear that I had before fights every time. And I didn't really figure this out until later. It's like, I'm not scared of getting punched in the face, because Clay hits me harder than probably anybody I've ever dealt with. Like, well, what am I scared of? I'm scared of being exposed and being put under the microscope for everybody else, but more importantly, myself, identifying you ain't as good as you thought you were. Or I'm sitting there on my couch, or I'm shadow boxing, doing my thing. Like, I feel pretty good. Well, go test it. And sparring is a test, but there's no win or lose with sparring. You lost, there's definitely not fun getting popped in the mouth, but I'm not putting myself into someone else's hands where one hand gets raised and one hand doesn't. I'm like, fuck, I spent all this time doing this. I thought I was good. Circling back to my point that writing is the purest form of making yourself vulnerable, because, you're putting it all out there. So, I definitely admire everything you're doing, because
I've done it in several different areas. The music. I just put out the Blood Clot record 2 years ago. Our guitar player ODs and dies. But I've been doing the music. I've been doing the books. I wrote TV pilots that had Howie Tannenbaum want me to come to LA. That's Vince Gilligan's agent, and say, man, you don't know how many scripts I get across my desk. You fucking did work, man. You're like, to get the affirmation from him, like, yo, you're a fucking good writer. Move out to California. I'll get you writing on a show. Or putting these films out there that I'm working 10 years. I started writing in 89, man. Trying to tell this same story, right? That's 30 fucking years now. And I'm just figuring out how to tell it now. Just like Alan Ball, when he wrote American Beauty and he won the Academy Award for Best Screenplay, everybody's like, oh, you're an overnight success. He's like, yeah, it only took me 15 years. So,
exactly.
Mr. Robert McKee says something very important. And he goes, when the audience steps into the movie theater, their IQ is so focused on that screen, their IQ goes up 20 points. They're looking at every little fucking thing. They're trying to figure it out, right?
Exactly.
And you know the way you lose the audience's attention?
What's that?
When the conflict dies.
Yeah.
When you lose the conflict, you lose the audience, because that's the power of story. That's the power of life. When we try to avoid conflict and play things safe all the time, and, I don't want to have, that's not, it took Goggins a lot to go from that guy that was obese, that accountability mirror that he talks about. The conflict that must have gone on inside of that man's mind, and then and constantly, while you're never going to be good enough to be a Navy SEAL, all this, that's conflict within ourselves too.
And I think go ahead. I'm sorry.
There's conflict on 3 levels. There's inner conflict with ourselves. There's interpersonal with with other people, and I forgot the last, but with others, and then there's also conflict that has to do with society at large.
Absolutely.
So, you know, so that's the 3 levels of interpersonal and extrapersonal, right? So, and inner conflict. So, a great story has conflict on all 3 levels. You know, it's like,
Absolutely.
so that's what I'm trying to do, and I just see so many lessons of myself. Just like when I had to put the, you know, in my book, the sexual abuse stuff that I suffered as a child, which I avoided and never told anybody, not even my mother. My brothers didn't talk. Like I always said I would sit there and fucking break down for 2 hours sobbing and then just put the book away and not be able to work on it. And come to that point again and again and again and again for 2 years. And it wasn't until I sat in Robert McKee's seminar and he said that, you know, it's not what happens to us, it's what we do as a result of what happened to us. That's the power of story. So that conflict was there for me too, and I kept surrendering to it. And it was such a deep inner conflict. This was shit that I fucking kept inside of me since I was 8 or 9 years old. Through all the shit, the jail, the addiction, the fucking streets, the Cro-Mag tours, all the shit. Never told anybody. And, you know, I was avoiding that conflict. And now I realize it was one of the best things that I ever did to face that. And it was like, you know, when a bone sets improperly, they have to re-break the bone and set it. And that's what's happened. That's what happened with me. That's why when shit went haywire and people fucked me over, I took it so personally and then destroyed myself. There's only so much I would do to other people that fucked me over. But in the end, the person that I hurt the most was myself, because that's who I took it out on.
Yeah. So this is going to seem like it's coming far from out of left field, but do you ever see that 80s movie? It's funny that I'm referencing 80s songs in 80s movie. You ever see that 80s movie, The Never Ending Story? So I'll give you the synopsis. So the world that they live in is coming to an end. It's being ravaged by this thing called the Nothing. So they have to get this little warrior kid to basically go problem solve. And to get to where he's going, he has to go through these 3 oracles. So the first one are these sphinxes that shoot lasers through. And as a little kid watching this, I'm thinking, yeah, I could see that. That's pretty dangerous. I forget what the second one is, but before he even went out on the journey, they warned him. The third one is the worst. This is the one that anybody who's ever gotten there sends men screaming. So as a kid, I'm like, you know, what's this going to be? And he gets to the top and he, you know, pulls the curtain away and it's just a mirror. And I'm like, what the fuck is that?
Wow.
But as a kid, I'm like, well, I don't get it. But the older I get, I'm like, man, that is spot on, because it's the mirror that's showing you your true self. And, you know, you can look at that in a bunch of different ways. The stuff that you don't want to deal with, the stuff that you don't have, but that you put the facade on to the rest of the world, you know, and you're talking about, you know, having to look in that mirror figuratively to you know, to be able to put out the art, the work, the value that you did for that book alone. You know, that is terrifying, and that's stuff that most people want to do. And, you know, like I said, the older I get, the more I understand the difficulty, but the value at really taking a hard look in the mirror, and not to fix your hair, because I don't have any anyways, but you know, to really see, you know, what do you have and what's really going on inside you, not what do you want and what do you want the world to perceive, but what's really, you know, what's really threading the fabric to your soul together.
Yeah.
And that's that, man.
Well, you know, that's another thing is, you know, characterization is all the observable qualities of a person. Oh man, that guy's fucking tough. That guy's got his shit together. Oh man, look at this guy, how cool he is. Like, or that guy's a fucking nerd, you know, like this and that. So it's the mask that we wear in public, right? And then there's true character. And the true character is only revealed under pressure, because that's when you see who's who, when the pressure's on. Like the Marines say, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, right?
Absolutely.
So the greater the pressure, the greater the revelation of true character. And that's why the selection process for special forces is so hard, because they used to say that, you know, being in the Navy a little while and, you know, going through the initial screening process to go to buds and all that, and passing that, and then preconditioning. But it was like, that's the whole thing, is to weed out the bugs, right? So, you know, when McKee taught the class, I took his 3-day story seminar, and it's 10 hours a day. You're sitting there, and it's like, by the end of the 3rd day, you walk out of there and you got fucking tears rolling out of your eyes of what you just experienced. And that's no bullshit. And the thing was, when he talked to that part, he goes through his whole book. And when he got to the part of characterization versus true character, he developed a little rapport with me. So, you know, he was walking around, and, you know, he walks around the stage and he's like, you know, if you saw Adaptation,
I never saw
Brian
that one.
Cox played McKee to the T, right?
Okay.
So he walks around and he goes, I'm going to give you an example of true character versus characterization. And he goes, you see all these guys, and, you know, he's walking around the stage, and I'm sitting in the front row. And he goes, they got all the tattoos and the whole image of being these super tough guys. And then the pressure comes, and they're fucking marshmallows. And then the guy that you would never expect, his true character is he's the one that fucking steps up. And he's the one that's the real tough guy. And I've seen that so many times. You know,
definitely
in
see
my
that
life.
doing jujitsu. You definitely see, you know, the people that have the facade of being tough, and then I've been choked out by enough 125-pound dudes or women to know, like, it really has nothing to do with the way you're peacocking. It's the skill set and that inner balance to be able to pull it out. So I've experienced that a few times myself, and wound up half unconscious because of it. So you started hinting at something I wanted to get into, and I opened with this as far as the triple entendre to the age of quarantine. And, you know, I said the first one and the last one make the most sense. I'm in quarantine now, age of quarantine, you know, but I had indicated that I've started thinking that we've been in, I wouldn't say quarantine, but definitely imposing social distancing on ourselves in spite of, you know, the facade and I would say the ill-conceived notion that we're socializing more, specifically through social media. So, you know, when you're talking about the way you present yourself as whatever, and social media is definitely the, you know, the cornucopia of the way people want to present themselves.
People's social media pages, they got the best lives in the fucking world.
100%. So I had put down here, do you think that things will get back to normal? And I did not mean get back to normal as far as people not wearing masks. I'm talking about the pumping of the brakes. And again, the conversation I had with Caesar, I brought up the notion that abundance and appreciation are two great tastes that don't go great together. We have an abundance or a perceived abundance of being able to get out and go socialize and be able to connect with people face to face. Like, this is as close to connecting with somebody outside my wife and kids I've had in weeks. And I'm just wondering, do you think that this will be a big enough stone cast into the pond to shake up the way people socialize, the way people make themselves available? Or do you think that it's just going to be back to business as usual?
My hope is that people, wake up from this. But my friend made a great comment the other day, and he said, he's like a real thinker. And he said, yeah, man, somebody said to me, I can't wait till things get back to normal. And he's like, yo, bro, that so-called normal is what the fuck got us to where we're at. Look what we're doing on the planet. Look what we're doing to each other. Look what we're doing to the living entities on this planet. That normal that you speak of is a fucking sickness, man. And hopefully, just like an hysterical person, you see it in the movies, they get a good slap in the face.
Yeah.
My hope is that people wake up, and I am seeing it a lot. I'm getting a lot of messages of people that are like, now you have to sit with yourself, and now you have to face that person that you're fucking scared of.
That mirror.
And that's like that mirror in that movie.
Exactly.
It's like, that's what it really is all about. And until you start doing that, things are not gonna change. And I just hope that people are utilizing this time to do a little self-analysis. I know I am.
Sure.
You have to. You have to.
Yeah. I think people and I use the word normal intentionally, and on my notepad it's in quotation marks. I find that people often confuse or abuse the difference between normal, common, and optimal. So common, it has nothing to do with what we should be pushing towards or what optimal is. And again, maybe that's my optimistic perspective that this will shake the foundation enough where people look to get back and look to, be a little bit more courteous, look to take care of one another. But at the very least, you have to start with a single step is, learn to start engaging, a little bit more personally now that it's taken away. This is the closest I can get. And it's funny because I never even had the concept to do something like this, do something face to face on Zoom until it was taken away from me. I don't have the ability to be around people anymore. It's like, I'm sick and tired of texting people. I'm sick and tired of it. I've been doing it for years, but definitely now that I'm stuck in this house, I have this hunger to start branching out from the normal, which normal for me now sitting in this house is not optimal. Optimal is like, I need to see my friends. I need to see other people. And don't get me wrong, I open with the notion of, the adaptation to things in a reactive way. I love the fact that I am stuck in this house with my family because I'm learning how to be more balanced, more selfless, looking out, as much as I can for other people's needs, or at least trying to find a balance between mine and theirs. But what really slapped my face is like, man, I need to get some face-to-face time with somebody else. And lucky for me, I got some friends to do that with. And I'm optimistic that, that this will be enough of a shake to the foundation of the system that, people get their fucking faces out of their phones at the very least at dinner, like you were talking about. You walk into a restaurant and you've got a table full of people, but they're all scrolling through their social feeds. And, as far as social distancing is concerned, like, you might be sitting right next to the person in front of you, but you're as socially distanced as I am from you right now.
We were already doing that,
Exactly.
I have a lot of friends that are in business. My one friend has a $3 billion company, guys I've, known. And the one thing that they always say is you have to find where there's a need of something that's lacking and address that and create something to deal with that. And, that's that famous saying, necessity is the mother of invention.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of need in society for a lot of different things. I really feel the communication aspect and how we deal with other human beings, and how do we deal with our space? How do we deal with our neighborhood? How do we deal with our planet? How do we deal with other living entities? That's the process of ahimsa. It's to do no harm. Like,
yep.
And it's not that makes you a coward. The greatest warriors of all time had the most compassion and care for other people.
Absolutely.
It's not, you don't become weak by caring and being compassionate. That makes you stronger, actually.
Absolutely. If you have the strength to be able to make yourself vulnerable and available to be compassionate, I mean, that right there is testimony of what type of strength you have. Now, we had just discussed the notion of my optimism for people learning to gel together, talked about people taking care of one another. And that's a perfect segue into the next thing I want to talk to you about. Have you read the book Tribe by Sebastian Junger?
No.
So
I've heard of it. I haven't read it.
So I'll give you the breakdown. So he basically describes the ways in which people, of usually larger groups come together in a time of adversity, a time of trauma. And there's a bunch of different references from 9/11 to Bosnia, the Blitzkrieg in London, and the ways in which that trauma to the Holocaust, it pulled people together to learn to take care of one another. And it's funny, I had just finished that book probably a week before the shit really hit the fan in New York. So I had seen things about coronavirus in Italy. Yeah, so it was fresh on my mind, and I'm thinking, all right, well, here it comes. And we're seeing signs of that, as far as, people that are working in hospitals and people, the average person trying to get them, the face masks and this and that. But you walk into a grocery store or down the street, it's not quite the same. And you and I both lived in New York City on September 11th. And I remember, really being taken off guard walking down the street. People stopping me like, hey, man, are you okay? Is everything all right? Do you need anything? I'm like, I'm fine. And I thought it was just that one dude. And then, half a block later, the same thing. Like, people really, at least for the first 36 to 48 hours, that was the vibe. So I don't feel like I'm seeing that, and I feel like there's one of two reasons. We look at 9/11, Blitzkrieg. The threat was something foreign and something that you could point your finger at. With this, what we're dealing with is something unknown. You can't see it. You feel potentially like any person next to you is the threat. Anything you pick up might be the threat. So I'm hoping that is the the anomaly for why this is, out of all the things referenced where this is not happening, is because everything you see outside of your home is the threat. But I also wonder, and this thought has flirted, with me a couple of times, is it just that, or is it that sense of isolation, me, that was kind of tapered in through social media and the way that we've been interacting with one another? And, I know the internet was around in 2001, but, social media was not present. So you can't take it as a one-to-one comparison and look at the way people reacted. And I'm sure it is the prior. I'm sure it is everything around you might be the enemy. But I can't help to wonder, is it also the way that we've been conducting ourselves, the way we've been interacting with one another, basically at arm's length, where we're projecting what we want people to see, but we're not really receiving that. You don't get that through social media. So I wonder, based on those two concepts, what your thought is on why there's such a difference. And let's just take 9/11 and this, people in New York City, and just put those two in a vacuum, the difference from one to the other.
I'm going to tell you, because I was here on 9/11 and I lived down over here. So I'm like a mile away from ground zero. So I got to see a lot of what went down, and 9/11 like brought people together, like you were saying. People were getting together. The mosques were full. The temples were full. The yoga centers were full. The churches were full. NA meetings were full. I was going out to Union Square Park and feeding people and chanting with the Hare Krishnas. Everybody was taking the literature and wanting to know what this is. I mean, and I'm just saying, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm just saying, if you were trying to socially engineer something, or engineer something that would have an effect of dividing people, this is the first perfect bioweapon. Because now it's like, who the fuck are you? Stay away from me. Are you contaminated? It's
even within your own tribe. My mother.
I can't go see my mom right now.
That's like my mother-in-law was supposed to come here.
Mother just died. He can't have a funeral for her. You can't go see loved ones in the hospital or in senior centers. This is like having a complete opposite. It's pushing people apart. Like I said, Jesus, man, if you wanted to engineer something that was going to just fucking do a number on any unity or anything.
I wonder, we talked about resilience, and there is no denying that people are being pushed apart. My mother-in-law comes here every spring, looks forward to it. The kids love her coming. We had to cancel the trip, so there's no doubt we're being pushed back. And to circle back to that question I asked before is I just hope that we're being pushed back the same way a slingshot doesn't get pushed back, it gets pulled back. There's further and further distance, but once things are let go, and I don't know when that is, I don't know what that's going to look like, there's a vaccine, whatever it looks like, and that the rebound it is time to finally identify like where all the kinks in the armor have been, like the ways I've been fucking up, the ways I've been kind of keeping people at arm's length that I even if I wanted to, I can't see now, and find that appreciation. Like, thank God we can finally get back to this in the event that happens.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of positive aspects too. The air is clearing up of all this commerce stopping and people's bullshit being put on hold.
Yep.
the canals in Venice, the fish and the geese have returned, and the water's clearing up, and the air is clearing up, and it's like, one person said, and I quoted it and I posted it. He goes, "It's like Mother Nature sent us to our rooms."
Yeah, just exactly.
And I hope that while we're in our rooms, we do some inner searching here, and instead of attacking each other on social media, which is why everyone's hitting me up. What's your thoughts on this? I will not post anything like that because that's not going to help the situation. Exactly. My mind races all over the fucking place. There's a million scenarios of what the fuck could be happening right now. What is that speculation going to do, or posting some conspiratorial fucking website? Everybody and their fucking mother has a theory now of what the fuck's going on.
Yeah.
But it's like, I'm trying to connect with people, and I have people hitting me up, and the ones that I respond to are the ones that are like, "Hey man, I'm trying to like meditate now that I have this time. Like, could you have any areas you could send me to, websites on how to meditate or chant or do yoga or cook?"
You mean a question that really facilitates an answer.
Like, facilitates a positive answer, because it's about PMA. It's about a positive mental attitude, positive mindset. That's what we need to get through, to get through this. And speaking of social distancing, I don't know how many motherfuckers I've blocked in the last. That's my social distancing.
Brings your true colors to the surface.
Cool heads prevail, man.
Absolutely. You got to be emotionally and strategically flexible if you want to be tough, and that this is definitely forcing the tough people to do that. You gotta, tough doesn't mean being a knucklehead and grinding it out. It means surveying the terrain and having that flexibility and mindset, emotional state. I want to touch on that. I'm going to let you get going. I'm going to get going so I can get these kids to bed. I also got, you set it up perfectly with that quote about Mother Nature sending us to our room, and that we should be taking advantage of this time. Again, God willing, that you're in a position where your health, the health of those around you, grants you that time. So I happen to fit that category. Now, with that said, without getting into, you had also brought up the specific on how do I meditate. The focus of this entire conversation was on growth. And what I wanted to end with is, for people that take that piece of advice you just gave, if you're fortunate enough to spend time in your room, figuratively speaking, to work on yourself, what are things that people can and should be doing today, tonight, tomorrow, to start working towards growth in whatever definition that holds for them?
Well, I can tell you practically, and I can only speak from my personal experience of what I do. And people say, "Okay, man, how does your fucking day start?" And I'm going to tell you, the minute I open my eyes, and I told somebody this the other day, the first thing I do is bow my head and I say my mantras, and I start the day with positive thoughts, and then positive actions. The thought process has to be followed up by action. So what I do is I turn off all external sources of anything. I'm not sitting there, and pretending that I'm meditating or whatever the hell. I turn off all that external, and pretending that I'm meditating or whatever the hell. I turn off all that external sensory stuff. What?
Noise. Right. It's all
gone.
noise.
And the first thing I do is I chant, I close my eyes, I take deep breaths, I survey my internal thoughts and what I'm trying to accomplish on that day. How can I be of service, which is vitally important for creating a positive. I'm trying to create a positive atmosphere and environment. I don't give any time to the negative, and so I'll do my meditation and my chanting, and then I'll read some philosophy, because I think it's important to look at things that are happening with a philosophical perspective. You know, why is all this happening? And it's really a call from the universe for us to change. And that's, you know, how can I facilitate that and then be of service to others? Absolutely. And then I get into the writing and then the training. So it's like, it's action, action, action. I'm keeping my day, and I already made my schedule the night before what I wanted to do. Absolutely. But you really have to, you know, it says in the Bhagavad Gita as it is that it's easier to control the raging wind than it is to control the mind. Absolutely. Right? So how does the mind become controlled? The mind becomes controlled by the intelligence which sits over the mind. Like when I want to, here's a perfect example. I overheard somebody talking, yeah, this guy, man, sells coke. I was in his house the other day. He had like fucking 3 kilos. Now, this is me 30 years removed from freebasing and crack. You know what my mind said? If you rob that motherfucker, you could smoke freebase for a month straight.
You got to beat that mind back with a stick.
So the intellect has to control the mind. So instead of me going on here when I get up and going, oh shit, look at this motherfucker talking shit on my page, that shit's out. I'm using my intellect to absorb philosophy, right?
Yes, sir.
Because I know that's what's gonna make me have a good day today, man. When I'm, you know, I'm looking at all the positive stuff, the beautiful stuff. Like, I've seen enough of the ugly stuff. I'm like, where's that gonna get me? Focusing on that.
Yeah, man.
I'm not even watching this fucking news. You know, I'm gonna tell you, this dude, they got this video, New York Tough, and he's like, do away with the fear, do away with the anxiety, do away with the paranoia, Cuomo. And I'm like, that's all you guys are spreading on the TV. What about all the people that are getting healed? Like, so I'm not engaging in that dialogue externally or internally.
Yeah,
I'm avoiding it all. I'm trying to. This is a test for us, and this is the pressure. This is what's going to determine our true character. Who the fuck are we? We think we're so together and all this, but this is the test. How are you going to utilize this time that you have? You're locked up with yourself. That mirror in that, like in that movie, is right there. All right.
Yeah, yes, sir.
This is your real fear and your real enemy. Are you going to deal with it?
Absolutely. So I'm going to have to break because I got to go feed those kids and I got to take a leak. But a couple of things, man. You know, you touched on the notion of service, and then we'll end with this notion. Jonathan Haidt, not H-A-T-E, but H-I-D-T. I think it's Haidt, wrote a book called The Happiness Hypothesis. You know, and it's essentially about what generates true happiness, and that's one of the biggest foundational elements is that service to others. So, you know, people that are looking to find happiness and fun are not synonymous and are almost, they're not almost always, very frequently antonyms from one another. You can be fun and be having fun and be miserable and you can be very happy and stressed at the same time. But thank you so much for doing this, brother. I got to bounce. I got to go.
Thank you, man.
Focus on number one upstairs.
I know. You got a full plate up there.
Yeah, man. But
right.
Thank you so much. Be well.
Anytime, brother. I always love chopping it up with you, bro.
Yeah, man. I appreciate it. But I'll be checking in on you. But thanks again, man.
Thanks.
All right, have a good night. Thank you.
Peace, brother.
Peace.